On the last episode, we covered Strider, an incredible game, the sort that in future years you might show to your bored grandchildren while telling them that gaming was so much better back in the old days. Like the best films and albums, it hasn't aged a day, its class is eternal. But how do you make a sequel to such a great game? That was the 64p question, and the one that Capcom got massively won. Nowadays, when most people think of Strider 2, they probably think of Capcom's 98 arcade and PS1 title, a very good update of the series indeed, with yet more epic stunts, fights, and everything else that made the original so great. But that wasn't the first attempt, was it? Indeed it was not. Well, there was this little game on the Mega Drive about 6 years beforehand. Americans know it as Journey from Darkness Strider Returns, but for us Europeans it was called Strider 2. It was unquestionably the sequel to one of the greatest games ever made. And alas, it was diabolical. Even before the game came out, alarm bells were ringing. Capcom themselves weren't going to make the sequel. In fact, they wouldn't even publish it. European landfill publishing house US Gold did the honours, and they handed the game to their favourite developers, Tiertex. Tiertex had previously handled the home computer ports of Strider, and in the main they were all about lousy 8-bit versions of arcade hits. They certainly didn't have any kind of good reputation. But they really went to town on this one. Strider 2 on the Mega Drive virtually has nothing to do with the spirit of the original game and how it was made. In fact, it plays like a hatchet job, the European games mafia doing their best to wreck a rival Japanese title with a single game. Remember how Strider kicked off? The glider taking you into the heights of a Russian city where you dropped down and immediately started tearing enemies apart? Well, this is how Strider 2 begins. Yep, a beginner's trap. I'm punished for the crime of walking forward a few steps with a mine that I can barely see. And this sets the tone for the whole game going forward. Whereas the original delivered a flowing experience of constant movement, this goes for a bitty experience where you constantly have to check for obstacles and enemies. Don't even think about not constantly swinging your cipher. If you don't, you're bound to get hit by an enemy that comes out of nowhere. You could fling yourself at the original game with reckless abandon. Here though, it's all about slow and careful play, uninspiring, dull, and decidedly not Strider. This review really is like shooting fish in a barrel. Everywhere you look there's another fatal error. What about the first proper enemies we see? They come directly from above, making them very hard to hit because Hiru can only attack directly forward. Now this was the case in the original game as well, only Capcom designed that game competently so it didn't matter. I never thought that I needed to attack in any other direction. Tiertex on the other hand have me thinking that in their game's first minute, because I simply can't hit these guys, and many times I just get trapped. At least they kept the death animation. Anyhow, let's look at some more of the game's features, like slowdown. Again, slowdown was a feature in the original, but only when insane things were happening on screen. Here, the following things cause slowdown: jumping, enemies, swinging your sword while moving, swinging your sword while jumping, swinging your sword at all, doing anything whatsoever. Slow down, slow down, slow down. And it's hard to see why, because the game looks dreadful. Everything seems to blend into one another because the game has such poor sense of colour, enemies don't stick out at all. I am amazed that Tiertex could look at what they'd made and see it as being consistent with the original. Their style is so generic, it makes a 50s B-movie look like an H.R. Geiger work by comparison. And why has Hiru gone from wearing blue velvet to becoming the man in the white suit? The blue was perfect, surely, a classic costume, and comparatively the white just looks so bleh. But then there's something I actually haven't told you yet. Because this guy, he may look and move almost exactly like Strider Hiru, but he is not Strider Hiru. His name is Strider Hinjo. I guess Capcom told Tiertex to at least leave Hiru out of this crap. Hinjo does actually have some new abilities. He can shimmy up ropes, he automatically summons orbs to help him in boss battles, and he can even throw shurikens. But I ask you once again, what do these things have to do with Strider? Why would a Strider use a rope when he can jump off some walls? And when would he ever use a ranged weapon? I mean, is there a yellow streak amidst all that white? The shurikens do help with boss battles somewhat, but it's not in the spirit of the game, and it's all cancelled out anyway by the hideous box art that makes Hinjo look ridiculous. The home computer version of this game has even worse art. He looks like Mr. Ass Billy Gunn of all people. As time marches on, things just get worse. The cutscenes, with art clearly half-inched from the original game, are hilarious. Admittedly, Tiertex did do well to get quite a few voice samples in this game in okay quality for the MD to boot, but the content is very bad indeed. This is honestly the only MD game out there where I feel the need to complain about the voice acting. I'm sure that Grandmaster Mayo and Solo are very sorry that this had to happen to them. Mayo's minions suffer an even worse fate. They all just rush senselessly forwards at you, and there's no memorable design to be found in any of them. Not that that stops them being irritating, because they spawn entirely at random and at a pretty high rate to boot. The original game was once again handled with more care. Capcom actually bothered with complex, intricate ideas like, say, enemy placement that Tiertex just couldn't get their noggins around. This contributes greatly to the painfully slow gameplay. I don't know when or where the enemies are going to come, which makes the flow of the game really jerky. I always have to stop, or worse still, I have to bravely run away as enemies swarm on me, because playing this game in the relentless, dashing style that the original championed is just suicidal. You know, I keep getting the impression that Hinjo wasn't exactly top of the class in Strider School. Just me. Sadly, we're not finished yet. What about bugs? Well, let's look at Solo here. What, is he allergic to platforms? Then why is he standing on outer space? Deary deary. The collision and the hit detection is really ropey. I mean, did I honestly miss that ledge? Or not hit that enemy? Why, when I'm struck by this electricity, do I freeze and get knocked back, meaning that I lose control and get battered around until I lose a life? Oh, I have so many questions and so few answers that aren't based around 4-letter words. And if you're thinking about the level design, don't be alarmed, because that's awful too. Every level is like a maze, filled with irritating dead ends and the same obstacles repeated again and again and again, as if they just pasted the first half of a level over into the second half. Oh, and we also have drops of faith. In this clip, I picked the one wall to go down, and I was punished accordingly without being able to see where I was falling. Just wonderful. The main issue though is that, bluntly put, there is no life in this game. Once you are flying through the sky, rushing down mountains, being an unstoppable force. Now you're crawling through rectal tunnels with toxic waste burning your eyes, occasionally stopping to bat away hordes of cack-covered tsetse flies. If this game is filled with moments, then they're moments of sheer frustration, hopelessness and misery. Strider 2, in short, is less of a true sequel and more like a bizarro world version of the game where everything is utterly shit. Mind you, there might actually be an explanation for the game's lack of quality. It's clear that aside from the character and his sword, this game has absolutely nothing in common with Strider. So why is that? Well, Tiertex's Strider 2 was actually first released in 1990 on British home computers. It was the sequel to their conversion of the original. Now, systems like the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64 were great at many things, no question about that. But fast action-packed arcade conversions like Strider weren't usually one of them, and certainly not when Tiertex were involved. It was hard not to be disappointed by their games when companies like Ocean usually managed to do a good job with arcade conversions, despite the limitations of the systems. And so Tiertex's sequel was made with those platforms in mind, and the result was fairly well received at the time on the Spectrum and C64, although not so much on the Amiga. In retrospect, this game wasn't good on any platform, but the fact of the matter is that it's virtually the same game that we got on the Mega Drive. Strider 2 is a port of a 2-year-old Speccy title onto a state-of-the-art 16-bit console. And unbelievably, it even took some things out from the home computer version. Although I don't know whether to be thankful or disappointed that this game doesn't turn Hinjo into a lumbering robot for the boss fights. Yes, that actually did happen, just there, right in front of your eyes. And no, it's not awesome or fun in any way, shape or form. You have terrible weapons, you can't jump, and you move like a crippled tortoise. In any case, the Mega Drive was not the place for an old Spectrum title, and the game got pilloried by the gaming press. With a single game, it appeared as though Teartex had killed Strider off for good.
Live for me. Don't die, Strider.
In the end, the big question is how Capcom could have let this happen. What was the legalese behind it? Did Capcom really give this title their blessing, or was it a bit sketchier? Who knows, it is probably just another example of Capcom's famed laziness, but one does wonder if there was more to it. In any case, they should have handled one of their finest titles with more care. Strider should have been guarded jealously, and getting Teartex involved was clearly a horrible decision. However, eventually things worked out. Strider Hero first resurfaced as a part of the Marvel v Capcom fighting game series, and was then given a brand new game in 1998, a hit in the arcades and on PS1. Oh, and what did Capcom call that game? Ah yes, they called it Strider 2. Just like that, US Gold and Teartex's game went down the memory hole. If you ask Capcom execs today about Strider Hinjo, they'll shake their heads and turn away. He doesn't exist. He never existed. He who controls the past controls the future, and he who controls the present controls the past. But if you ever had the misfortune to play the previous Strider 2, then you'll know that there is no amount of doublethink that can ever heal the scars it leaves on your mind, body, and soul.
Strider.